This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 205, 5 resources for broadening your podcasting horizons. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you grow your tribe and your bottom line through insanely good content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is December 15th, 2016. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, this podcast is also available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and now Google Play Music. So if you like what you hear, please feel free to click on over and subscribe. Also, my new book, The Content Marketing Coach, Everything You Need to Get in the Game and Win, is now available on Amazon in book and Kindle format. Here's what Jay Baer had to say about it. He said, practical, accurate content marketing advice from a real pro, plus a football theme? I love this book. To learn more about the book and to download a free chapter, go to contentmarketingcoachbook.com. So we are now midway through December, hard to believe, but for many of us, this is kind of a slow month business-wise. Of course, our personal lives are crazy with travel and family and gifts and all that stuff. But business-wise, for a lot of us, this is a time when things start to slow down. So what we're doing this month is sharing some ways for you to use this opportunity to broaden your horizons. And last week, we talked about SEO. We shared 5 resources for using this downtime to brush up on your SEO knowledge. And if you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed. Today, we're continuing our theme of how to make the most of December downtime, if you have it. And today, we look at how you can brush up on your podcasting savvy. So if you're thinking about getting into podcasting in 2017, we've got some great resources to help you get started. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Kind of a quiet week in the content marketing universe, as one might expect this time of year. We do have some news out of Instagram. They have announced 2 new features that are coming to comments. Users will soon be able, we don't have a timetable on this, but they will soon be able to turn off comments on any post. And then Instagram is also adding a like comments feature. So if someone comments on your Instagram post, you'll have a little heart icon that you can tap on to like it. So again, no timetable on those new features, but look for them coming soon from Instagram. Also, some news out of Periscope. Man, poor Periscope. First they were overshadowed by Facebook Live, and now Instagram is, as we talked about last week, is going to be adding a live video function. But Periscope is still kicking, and so Periscope has released an update to its iOS app that allows broadcasters to save high-definition versions of their broadcasts to their devices. Users can turn on this option within the app's setting menu, which now offers the option to save in high definition. Now, again, this is currently available on iOS, so your iPhone and iPad. Periscope has not yet shared when it will be released on Android, but we can presume that will be coming soon. Okay, our content hit of the week is actually an ebook. It's called 60 Plus Content Marketing Predictions for a Successful 2017. This is an ebook by our friends at the Content Marketing Institute. So what they did is they went out and asked a group of experts to, as they put it, set the stage for our expectations and prepare us for what's to come in 2017. And the result of that research is the 9th annual ebook of content marketing predictions. So we're going to soon see a spate of blog posts and podcasts about predictions for 2017. Well, this puts it all into one nice, neat little bundle. Just a sneak peek, a preview, one prediction, and I thought this was very interesting, is that in 2017, we're going to see more brands launch print magazines. as a way to cut through the clutter. So the online world has become so noisy and crowded that brands are going to be going old school and producing their own magazines. And I'm sure the John Deere company is sitting back saying, haha, we've been doing that for over 100 years. Anyway, so this ebook, getting back to this resource, it is available as a free download, and I will, of course, provide the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please tweet it to me at Rach Parker so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, 5 resources for broadening your podcasting horizons. As I mentioned, December for many of us is kind of a slow month at the office. Not true for everyone. Of course, if you are in retail or travel or hospitality, I say God bless you. Eat your Wheaties, drink your Gatorade, and we will catch up with you in January. But for many of us, people are taking those use it or lose it vacation days. Things are winding down for the year. Maybe budgets have been used up for the year. And of course, we have all those wonderful holiday distractions going on. People leaving the office early for functions and things like that. So for many of us, not a whole lot of business going on. So that's why this is the perfect time to focus on your continuing education. Those resources you've been meaning to check out, but just haven't gotten around to. And today I want to talk about podcasting. So if you are planning on starting a podcast or looking into thinking about, interested in starting a podcast in 2017, this is a great time to get up to snuff, get your resources in line, and learn what you need to learn. Number one, to decide if a podcasting is right for you, and number two, to actually do one. Learn what you need to learn about the content side, the technical side, all that stuff. And I want to say, first of all, that's actually how I got into podcasting. In December of 2012, my business-wise, things were slowing down, as usually happens for me. And I had been reading a lot about podcasting, and I said, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to learn about it. So I downloaded some ebooks, and I signed up for a free course, and I really spent the rest of December thinking about or learning about podcasting and really getting up to snuff, so that lo and behold, in January 2013, this podcast was launched. So I want to stress that when I talk about podcasting, it's not just podcasting. It's not just the week-to-week show that shows up on iTunes. Think in broader terms. Think in terms of audio resources. For example, I've got some resources on my website that are audio only. So you just download the MP3 and you can load it on your smartphone and take it to the gym, or listen while you're walking the dogs or gardening, or in your car. Lord, I live in Houston, and we are the home of the 2-hour commute. But so when you hear me talk about podcasting, I use that as kind of a catchphrase for audio, because when I say audio resources, people don't really get it. But think in broader terms of what else you can do with that audio capability. For example, my friend John Buskell, who was just on our guest a few weeks ago to talk about his new ebook, he actually released an audio version of that ebook. So what he did is he put the ebook out there. Many people downloaded it, and then he went back and created an audio version. So he was able to get in front of his audience again, saying, hey, I know you're busy. You probably don't have time to sit down and read this substantial ebook. Here's an audio version that you can listen to in the car, at the gym, again, wherever you like to absorb your audio. So there are plenty of opportunities out there for sharing content via audio, and those are all worth at least exploring. So the first resource that I want to talk about is the podcast Answer Man. This is a podcast by Cliff Ravenscraft, and he is the man when it comes to podcasting. He's been podcasting himself since 2006. Yes, that's 10 years now. And he is one of the prime thought leaders in the field. Honestly, if you do nothing but absorb everything that Cliff Ravenscraft has put out there, you will be more than prepared to get into podcasting in 2017, should you decide to go that route. And Cliff actually teaches an online course for podcasting, and it's quite, it's not cheap, and he limits it to 20 people, and it's pretty. I mean, he's had waiting lists in the past, but the good news is every week he shares his expertise for free on the Podcast Answer Man podcast. So if you want to check him out, and I highly recommend you do, you can go to iTunes or your podcast program of choice and just search for Podcast Answer Man, or you can go to his website, podcastanswerman.com. And by the way, I will be sharing the URLs for all these resources in the blog post for this episode. So if you are driving and can't get to write something down, never fear, just go to the blog. It will be the first entry on the blog for a few days now. So I will have all those links for you. The second resource I want to talk about is an ebook. It's called A Complete Guide to Starting Your Podcast, and it's published by Tales Untold Media. Now, when I was learning podcasting back in 2012, I downloaded several ebooks, and like I said, I took an e-course, and many of those are not available anymore. And even if they were, they would probably be outdated from a technical standpoint. So I looked for something really current to share with you, and I happened to come across this book that I like a lot because, number one, it was just published this year in 2016, and number two, it's very comprehensive. I think it's about 53 pages, and it starts with, it doesn't jump right into the technical details. It actually has a chapter on defining your style, figuring out what you want to create before you get into, editing software, what kind of microphone should I use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, the title is A Complete Guide to Starting Your Podcast. The URL is Tales Untold Media, all one word, talesuntoldmedia.com/ebook, or you can just go to the blog post for this episode to get that link. The third resource I'm sharing today is a blog called the Podcast Motor Blog. This is they publish right about monthly, and they do share some solid practical advice for us podcasters. Recent topics include a post titled Podcast Audio Advice from Podcast Motor Audio Engineers. That's interesting to see what the engineers have to say. And another post that caught my eye was the ultimate guide to getting on podcasts as a guest. So advice not only for your own podcast, but how to broaden your scope and actually get featured on other folks' shows. So that URL is podcastmotor.com/blog. The fourth resource on our list is an e-newsletter called HotPod, HOTPOD. It is a weekly newsletter that covers the latest news and trends in podcasting. And I had the opportunity to check out a recent issue, and it included, for example, the latest statistics from Apple. And by the way, in 2016, listeners consumed over 10 billion downloads and streams of iTunes podcast, in case you didn't know. And it also talked about the trend of speed listening. And apparently there is a trend. There is so much binge-worthy content out there that listeners are figuring out ways to speed listen to podcasts, much the way that when we look at blog posts, we kind of skim through. So I thought that was interesting. I had not heard of speed listening before. So the URL for that newsletter, if you want to sign up for it, is hotpod.xyz. And I've never heard of that extension XYZ before, but apparently it is, as the kids say today, a thing. And number 5 on our list of resources is called The Audacity to Podcast. Now, if you're a podcaster yourself, you will recognize this play on words because Audacity is also the name of a sound editing software that many folks use, especially Windows users. The Audacity to Podcast is a blog and a podcast hosted by Daniel J. Lewis, who is himself a podcast consultant. So he's one of these gurus that we can go to for advice on podcasting. Recent titles include, Is Your Podcast a Reference or a Habit for Your Audience? ? And 5 Ways Better Writing Can Improve Your Podcast. And you know I love that one, right? The URL is The Audacity to Podcast. All one word smushed together.com. And once again, if you go to the blog post for this episode, I will have all those links for you. So if you have some downtime this month and are looking to get educated on podcasting, I recommend that you start with these 5 resources. And of course, as I said, I'll share the links on the blog. If you have any questions or if you have any preferred sources on podcasting that you want to chip into the pot, I would love to hear from you. And the best way to reach me is through the website, resonancecontent.com, or you can always tweet me at Rach Parker. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. Continuing on our theme of podcasting, I have to say sometimes I hear from marketers who want to get into podcasting, and this is an approach I even see in some of the resources out there, is people want to dive directly into the technical side. They say, okay, we want a podcast. What kind of microphone do we need? Do we need a soundboard? What's the best editing software? Et cetera, and go on and on. Do I need this kind of microphone, that kind of microphone? Is a headset okay, or do I need a microphone? Et cetera. So, and it's very tempting because we like toys, right? We want the toys. We want the gear. We want stuff that arrives in the mail and we open it. It's fresh and new. Rip open the packaging and learn how to use it, and it's awesome. And I'm going to advise you to wait on that for just a bit. We're going to get the toys. The toys are going to come, okay? Santa's on his way. He's going to bring the toys. But if you want to start a podcast, you will do yourself a service by spending a great deal of time and effort on the content before you think about buying a single piece of equipment. Think about what this podcast is going to be. What shape is it going to be? What's the mood? One thing I advise people to do is start with the why, the who, and the how. So the why is, what is the goal? What is the purpose of this podcast? If it's just sitting behind a microphone and spouting your opinions every week, or just kind of what's on your mind, that works for very few people. Very few people. You've got to be just a natural kind of radio personality that people just hang on your every word. So really think about, what is the goal of this podcast? And then once you've got that, actually in tandem with that, whom do you want to be talking to? Who is that audience? And just people who are interested in X topic is not going to cut it. Think about those audience personas that you've created for your other pieces of content marketing brilliance, and think about what subset of that audience you want listening to that podcast. And from there, you move on to the how. So what is your format? Is it going to be solo only? Is it going to be interview only? Is it going to be a duo like Joe Polizzi and Robert Rose do with theirs? And each approach carries with it its own set of pros and cons. So think about your format. Think about what's going to go into those shows. You might grab a piece of paper and just jot down ideas for your first 10, 12, 15, 20 podcasts and see if that approach, as we say in marketing, see if it has legs. See if it's something that you can extend out into something that has no expiration date. Are you going to be able to come up with content every week on this mission that you've set with yourself? So as you can see, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that content before you think about the equipment. And what that's going to do is it's going to give your podcast purpose. It's going to give it the beginnings of a brand. It's going to let it take shape. And if you don't do that advanced work, what you risk doing is kind of meandering around, figuring it out as you go. And that's going to make it really hard to build a following. People follow podcasts when they know what they're going to get. They like what they get. And, you set expectations. And if you kind of figure it out as you go, then people are only going to hang around for so long because you don't give them something to clamp down on and say, yes, this is why I like this podcast. So remember, just like blogging and all other content marketing assets, a great podcast starts with great content, and great content starts with great preparation and not speaking ability. I can't talk today. Okay, campers, that's it for me today. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play Music or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. And I want to thank you, you good folks who have already written reviews. We've got some great ones up there. And I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, remember that my new book, The Content Marketing Coach, Everything You Need to Get in the Game and Win, is now available in book and Kindle format on Amazon. To learn more about the book and to download a free chapter, visit contentmarketingcoachbook.com. And if you are new to content marketing or just looking to up your game in 2017, look no further. I just lay out that advice for you, plain and simple, so that you can hit the ground running. Okay, as you know, I always like to leave you with a quote, and today's quote comes from Steve Jobs. He once said, quote, "If you really look closely, most overnight successes took a long time," unquote. I love that because so many people are looking for the easy answer, looking for the quick fix, the magic bullet, and things just do not work that way. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to read that again. If you look really closely, most overnight successes took a long time. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.